What's up, guys? I'm Jason. This is the Freebirds Garage, and today we are talking bourbons and bikes on the 114th Street Bob by Harley Davidson. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the channel, guys. We are talking bourbon and bikes today. Matches and pairs with a motorcycle of our choice. And today we are talking about the Street Bob 114. And we are pairing it with a Buffalo Trace bourbon, which, let's get ourselves a pour. Gold goodness rolling out just about right there. Now, for those who've never had Buffalo Trace out there, it is a relatively inexpensive bourbon compared to a top shelf, but it gives you a top shelf taste, in my opinion. I think it matches very well with some of the top shelf bourbons that are out there, and that's why we are pairing it with the Street Bob 114. Oh, that's good. All right, so let's dive into the Street Bob 114. We're gonna go over the kind of the overview, little comparisons and that against the other Softails by Harley specs on their website. You're gonna get some mid mounts on this bike. You got a vivid black starting off with the price of that, because some of the other colors can cost a little more, but this one is at a $15,000 starting package with the 114. It's cheaper. I think it's at $13,600 for the 107. The dimensions of the bike, it's 91.3 in length. Seat height, you're at 25.8. Ground clearance, 4.9, which is actually higher than the other standard seats heights compared to the Lowrider S and the Fat Bob 114. The rake is at 30 degrees, which compared to the other Lowrider S, you were at 28, and the Fat Bob's at 28 as well. The 28, to give comparison, is more like what the FXDX Dynas were at and the FXRs, so it would have been nice to see that more at that 28. Trail, you're at 6.2, a little bit longer in trail, and a 5.7 compared to Lowrider S, and a 5.2 in the Fat Bob 114. Wheelbase, you're at 64.2 as compared to 63.6, and 62.6 on the Lowrider S and the Fat Bob 114. Where this changes up quite a bit is the tank. The 3.5 gallon tank on the Street Bob, and then you have a 5 gallon tank on the Lowrider S, and the Fat Bob 114, you have a 3.6. It is also the lightest out of all of these Softails. You're at 634 in shipped weight, or 659 in running order, compared to 679 for the Lowrider S, and the shaved down to 676 in the Fat Bob 114. So it is roughly 20 pounds lighter than its counterparts. They're all 114 across, so that's all standard. Obviously now with the new year with the Street Bob. Put all that together on why this bike is the new contender, because it, to me, is going to be the most customizable bike out of the package for performance. It is the bike that if someone is looking to put their own style on it, this will be the bike. You can do that with obviously any of their bikes, but to me this is the base model package with the biggest motor that you can get for the Softails in there. And at what the 114, you're going to gain I believe it is a 9% increase from your 0 to 60, and then 60 to 80, it's a 13% quicker on the road, on the highway than the 1. This is all compared lastly to the 107. Other highlight on this bike too, you also get a passenger pavilion, which most of us a lot of times just switch out the seat anyway, so you go over the aftermarket. But back to what I was saying about the customization, this is going to be the bike that if someone was looking to customize their own bike, I think this is the time to buy it. It may not be around for very long. They may axe it in the future if they go down to just the FXLRS and the 114 Fat Bob. I think this bike is really unique now that it has the 114. Since the motor is already done, it's already blacked out. So if you like that look, that part's already finished. The 107 is more chromed. So if you're going for a black, sleek look, it's there. And you don't have to do as much swapping out parts or coloring or powder coating any of the parts to make them that way. The other part too that a lot of people may think, well, why would you want to go with a non-inverted front end? Because that's what technology is today, and thank God Harley's finally woken up and they started putting that on their bikes finally. Why have a conventional dampening tube 49mm front end Well, that allows you to customize how you want. You can swap out the internals in these and make them perform quite well with maybe either a race tech, you can do an Olin's insert, or you can even do, I believe, GP suspension is the other one that you can put in these that would pretty much essentially run like an inverted front end for these bikes. So you can do that instead of running your, swapping out for an inverted front end. That's the front. You're also gonna get your spoked wheels that you can switch out. The other part that I really like about this bike that's been there since 2018 is the digital gauge that's out in front. It's right in front of your eyes as compared to the dash that is on the tank. It's very, that was a big mod. I know with a lot of Dynas, they would take the gauges and put them on top of their handlebars. They'd swap them out and put caps over their original dash. So it's cool to see that this is very special to the Street Bob alone, is the digital gauge that's on there. Now the aftermarket didn't really have anything ready for this because it was so brand new, and now there's a bunch of different gauge mounts that allow you to use risers on this. So if you want to swap out the mini apes that are on this bike, you can do so now, which is really nice. The aftermarket supports that, so you can go and do a T-bar if you want to do that, or if you just want to swap out the risers in general and go with a different handlebar, you now have that capability with the aftermarket. One in particular I know is Thrash and Supply makes a really slick looking riser that matches very well with this gauge mount setup. On top of the bike, the tank. It's a 3.5 gallon tank. It's the smallest tank out of any of the soft tails, which is really sweet, is that it slims down the bike quite a bit. And now a lot of people want a bigger tank. Touring, now this bike isn't really meant for the big touring. You can probably tour however you want with it. This is meant for bar hopping, cruising, ripping around the roads around locally, or your 100 mile, 200 mile, 300 mile trips if you want to go on to it. And that tank obviously isn't going to give you that many miles, but to me, I think it's sweet. It reminds me of the FXR, the setup on top, because it's going to give you a center-filled tank, just like the FXRs that had the center-filled tanks with the gauge mount already in front of you. It's already in your peripheral. So you're getting both of that, essentially just new age era of it. So that combined looks real nice to me. Obviously, as we move to the back, we already talked about the seat. You got a pavilion seat. They have an updated stitching with, it looks like carbon fiber stitching on there, which is, most of us just swap out the seats anyways for a more comfortable seat, because Harley stocks aren't very great, not very comfortable to ride on. And of course, you're still on a monoshock chassis frame, which is the new updated ones are fantastic. If you ever have rode one before, go out there and try one. If you haven't, rides like it's on rails. You can dive in the corner very easily on these bikes, and they control very well over the conventional shocks. Now there's also, I'm sure, people that do their aftermarket performance to their traditional dual shocks in the rear, but this from the factory will outrun a factory dual shock in the rear, and it does very well. This bike, when we move to the very back, is the bobbed rear end. This rear end I really like over the Fat bobbed rear end, because it has the classic bobbed rear end. The Fat Bob has its own style, but that's, I think, is in its own crowd that like that. This is just a traditional looking bobbed rear end, and it looks real smooth to me. It's like a classic Harley look, in my opinion, on it. So that really ties in the whole bike. I just think this bike, after going through all that you can just customize so many different options with this, and it's at a base price. You're not paying top dollar and then customizing. You're paying, on the higher end for bikes, but on Harley spectrum, you're getting the lower end bike with the higher end motor already inside, and that's hard to come by. You don't usually get those options, not even in cars today. A lot of people want in the car the big motor with the base model package or chassis, but that hasn't been around since the 70s or 80s. And now you can have that with this, which is really cool, is that you can have the motor, and then now it's up to you on how you want to modify it. And to me, I think the person that was looking at possibly what was going to come in 2018 and give us a new Dyna possibly, but instead axe them all, this is what they should be looking at. Or if someone that's been looking at Harley wants a traditional looking Harley, but with a performance driven, maybe not top line to fully dedicate themselves, but didn't want to go quite Sportster, this would be it. That's why I think this is really a good game changer for Harley. I think it's a real sharp looking bike. It competes with the rest of their bikes, but just gives you more of an option. It gives you more chances to customize than the Lowrider S, and compared to also the Fat Bob, because those are already done. You already have your inverted front end, you already have your club style looks, your fairing, you have the whole look. Both of them are essentially finished. Now you can obviously go more into them, however deep your wallet wants to go, but to me, you already have the inverted front end. Why, change a couple things, much good to go. But the Street Bob gives you that opportunity to change it however you want. There's already a couple companies out there that have already done their style on these, and they look awesome. Some have already swapped out the same front end for this is a 49mm from the Dyno Lowrider S, which had a 49mm as well, that swapped out that front end to this one and looks awesome. I think it looks real sweet. So if you're looking for that dual disc, the parts are out there. They're relatively inexpensive. Either you can find them secondhand or you can buy them from the factory, and you can get away for under $2,000 that would cost you for an inverter front end and still give you your look of a classic Harley. So just gives you an all-around chance to customize however you want. I think just gives you more options. So if anyone's looking for it, it is a fantastic bike. I'm excited to see this thing. Hopefully it takes off for Harley. I really hope it does well, because we need new riders. New riders mean new aftermarket parts, means new bikes. That's what it feeds. So the whole goal in this community for when you ride is that you need more riders, because more riders will provide more parts for these companies to make for them. That is the take on my opinion. I think the Street Bob's it's a knockout. It's a tune-up from what it used to be, and I think it was really needed for what Harley had from the 107, and I think there's a lot of people that should be looking at this bike to ride for 2021 and beyond, or however long they get. And if they cut it off and don't make it anymore, and they narrow down the line even more into just the the FXLR and the Street Bob, keeps that the Fat Bob 114. This bike will then be, to me, pretty rare, because now you have a Street Bob that has a 114, and they never put a bigger motor than what was stock or what was the standard big twin for that year since the Street Bob has ever been created for any of the models. All right, guys, so there it is, the overview of the Street Bob 114 and why I think it's going to be a knockout for 2021 and the years to come. Now, for pairing wise, as you can see now that we're coming together, the Buffalo Trace and the Street Bob are both the inexpensive in their classes, but at the top of the game when it comes to taste, in my opinion, and they pair quite well together. So if you just joined us and made it all the way through, I would greatly appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button, press that notification, tap that like, leave a comment below and tell me what you think. And as always, stay free, and I will catch you later.